Well, you're listening today to Lament of Hope blog and podcast, and I'm here today with Debbie and Tim Shultz from Tennessee. I was blessed to get to interview them a couple years ago while I was a journalism student at Patrick Henry College. And I read their story was just really encouraging to me, and I wanted to be able to host them on this program so that you guys could listen to it. Debbie and Tim experienced some early heartbreak even before they were married, and it involves an abortion story, which I think will be encouraging, especially for believers who may have had an abortion in their past or who are considering it now. This is a great story for you to listen to. Debbie and Tim, thank you so much for being here. It's great to be with you guys. So, just to start out, can you just go ahead and start from the beginning and tell us your story?
Awesome, Danielle. Thank you so much for having us. It's just our honor to be here. Yeah. So I'll just share a little bit and then Tim will share and we just kind of go back and forth. So a little bit about my childhood. I grew up in a very stable home in Illinois and loving parents, and went to church every time the doors were open, and really was just stable, and the very active in sports all through my younger years, and junior high, high school, and basketball, volleyball, and softball. And I was really no, I don't think anybody called me a good girl, but that was my reputation in school. I just was really focused on my grades and church and sports, and I didn't struggle with a lot of things that other people struggle with through their high school years. And so that's just a little bit about my early years.
I'm the youngest of 8 children, 5 boys and 3 girls. I'm a pastor's son. I grew up in Tennessee until about 7th grade and then moved to Illinois. And I was growing up about 8 miles south of where Debbie was growing up. We never knew each other. My story is similar to hers. I was successful playing ball and doing different things like that. And then we about to graduate and got an invitation to play in an all-star basketball game. And lo and behold, that's where I met her. She was playing in the same game. And so I basically stalked her, is what they would call it today, I guess. I called every Roberts in the book until I found her dad and asked if this was where Debbie lived, and they said yes. So that kind of started the whole relationship, and just all the things that we had in common, all the way down to wearing the same number as we played ball, and never knew each other the whole time. So God was orchestrating something from the very get-go. Mm-hmm. And so that was, I was raised, like I said, as a preacher's kid and in church all the time, knowing right from wrong. And, just believing that everything is good. I'm doing all right, and life is moving on by just the way that it's supposed to.
I would say, I have to add, looking through the book, that was a phone book. That was back in the day, in the 80s, when we had phone books and we didn't have Google to look people up.
This is true.
So we met right after high school, fell in love, and we were engaged within 9 months. Oh, wow. And we knew that we were meant to spend the rest of our lives together. And I went to the local junior college in our community and had scholarships there and played volleyball and basketball. And during that time, Tim actually moved to Mississippi for work. And so we were having a long distance relationship. And that after I graduated the junior college, I ended up getting a full ride basketball scholarship to the University of Evansville in Indiana for my junior and senior years of school. And so we decided that I would move to Mississippi for a couple months so that we could at least have some time together before I went off to college. And really, we set ourselves up for failure. I didn't have my own bedroom. I didn't have my own bed. And so we really put ourselves in compromising positions, even though my moral values and code was to wait until marriage for sex. That's what I had lived my whole life by. But putting ourselves in this scenario, it just took our relationship to another level that we weren't.
So did you choose to live together Is that what you mean when you went to Mississippi, or did you have your own place, or?
We lived together.
Okay.
He was living with somebody else, so some family members that were down there. And so I moved into his bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so it didn't take long before I missed my period and went to the doctor and heard the words, "Congratulations, you're pregnant." And those are supposed to be such joyful words and happy words. But for me in that season, it was dreadful. It was paralyzing. The fear, oh my gosh, now everybody's going to know that we've had sex before marriage. And that was my fear, because that was my whole good girl reputation that was on the line here. Now everybody's going to know
But when you,
that.
just to ask, if you moved in together, didn't your families already know you were doing that? Wouldn't that be assumed, or no?
No, they didn't know that what the arrangements were be. I think
Okay.
my parents kind of assumed that I would have my own bedroom and my own
Oh, okay.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't know. No, it wasn't like that. It was like, I'm just going down there to visit for 2 months. So it
Okay.
wasn't like I moved in. I just took
Yeah.
clothes there, just
I
for
see.
2 months. Yeah. Just to visit.
Now, did you guys, um, did you know that that was a possibility when that happened, that you might have a baby, or you didn't think that would happen?
We didn't really think that far in advance. We were
Okay.
trying to be careful, not in the way of using birth control, because then that would be another admission that we were crossing the line. But we were just trying to be careful and not cross the line, but got close enough to the line that I got pregnant.
Okay. So you
Yeah,
said
but
you heard the words from the doctor, and that was pretty devastating.
it was, the fear of what will everybody think, of disappointing our parents and the youth group, our pastors, my teammates, everybody, losing my scholarship. My family didn't have money for me to go to college, so we relied upon that scholarship. And so back then there weren't a lot of protections for women in sports. This was in the 80s. And so for me, there was so much work, and it was all based on fear
Yeah.
and disappointing people.
Yeah.
Shame. We were just so, the shame was so great because of the way we had grown up, knowing right from wrong, and still, faced with that fear of men and the fear of man. I gave up what it was to be a man for myself at that moment, and gave in to the shame and the fear, and we had an abortion.
How old
You
were
know,
you
I
guys at the time?
We were 20.
Okay, both of you were 20.
yeah,
Mhm.
What
yeah.
was that first
Yeah,
conversation like when, Debbie, you had to tell Tim that you were pregnant? What was that like?
that's a great question. He was with me every step of the way. So he went to the
Okay.
doctor with me. And I don't really remember telling him that I had missed my period. So I don't really remember, his reaction, but I'm sure he was stunned.
Yeah, it's hard, really to even remember that specific. I just remember being, going to the doctor, time had passed and we knew she didn't have a period. So we went to get it checked out, denying it the whole time, thinking to myself, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. When she's just late, that's all, just late. And then you get the reality of, no, she's not late, she's pregnant. And
Hmm.
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, all right, now what are we going to do? Um, and unfortunately,
How did the idea of abortion come up? Did you guys wrestle with that idea at first? How did it enter the mind?
You're asking some very good
yeah,
questions. Thank you for bringing that up, because I was very naive. I wasn't taught about my body and about sex, and I didn't have all that training. And so I definitely didn't know anything about abortion. My family wasn't for it or against it. We never talked about it, so it was actually some people that we had consulted with. We only talked to 2 people about this, and they were a husband and wife, and they're the ones that suggested that we get an abortion.
Were they
And
like a Christian couple, or was just a couple you met, or?
we'd like to not disclose that information just to
Okay.
protect their identity. Yeah. Yeah. But we didn't have Google back then to look anything up. We didn't really research anything. We just trusted that, okay, we're going to this hospital. That's where the abortions were being done at that time. So it must be a safe place. And we just knew that this is something that we need to hide. And if we get the abortion, then it will be as if nothing ever happened and we can move on with life.
Yeah. Just keep moving forward. That was kind of the mindset. We can get this taken care of. I'm thinking to myself, she's got $50,000 worth of scholarships waiting on her. I can't be the reason that she loses everything that she had. So if this is going to fix it, this is what, even then knowing, you still know because of the root of faith and the seed of faith that you have in you, knowing, being raised the way that I was raised. But still, once again, it was more about moving forward and getting to the next thing that everybody expected us to be at, the next level that everyone expected us to be at. And that next level was her going to school, me going there, and being around, and us getting married in the future. Those were the things. And this was going to throw a big wrench into all of that. And so in order to
Oh, Tim, I was just gonna say, did you want the baby or no?
well, I think we did want the baby, but that wasn't gonna fix what we thought was wrong, what I thought was wrong. That wasn't gonna make things right. And I thought at that time, I guess that, having the abortion and moving forward with the plan that was already set in motion, that was the thing. That was the best scenario. But, obviously it wasn't. It was just a way to appease my guilt.
And for you, Debbie, did you want the baby, or didn't want to be
I
a
didn't
mom,
really
or?
think of it as a baby at the time.
Okay.
There was such an urgency to do something because I was expected this. So I didn't get there till mid-June. So this was like late July when I found out I was pregnant, and I'm supposed to be at Evansville in like 3 weeks. And I
Wow,
still had to go home first to Illinois. And so there was that sense of urgency. Oh my gosh, we got to do something now. And so I don't think I even let my mind go there. I was just in denial. I didn't even think of it as a baby. So really having the baby and keeping the baby, that was never really an option.
Yeah.
We were just in denial, and fear was just paralyzing us.
Yeah.
So what was the abortion day like? Do you remember what it was like for you guys?
For me personally, I now know that anesthetic, when they put me under, that it blocks out my memory. And so I don't remember anything about where we went or the procedure. And I've been praying, God, if you want me to know something, if I'm just blocking this out, then, reveal it to me. Because I don't want to continue to live in denial. But I prayed that and nothing has come. So I really believe it was the anesthetic that just blocked out my memory, because when we had our first living son, I had a C-section and the same thing happened. They put me under and I don't remember things. But what I do remember, and I'll let Tim share about his experience, but I remember the drive home. It was an hour drive. We went to Jackson, Mississippi. Tim drove me there. He was with me, he stayed with me as long as he could. He drove me home. But I remember hitting every single bump on the way home, and the excruciating pain in my abdomen that I felt. And I was down for several days after that. So with the bleeding and the severe cramping, that's what I do remember.
Yeah. It was just another denial, or just the it's hard for me to explain. I was taking my fiance to a hospital, thinking to myself, these guys are doctors, she's going to get help. She's getting help here through this process, right?
Right.
It's how I'm feeling about this as this whole process is going through, thinking, okay, this is going to be okay, because this is where we're at, what we're doing. And I remember as they walked her in there, just praying that, Lord, please, I've hurt her enough. Don't let this guy hurt her anymore. Right. Just Lord, just help us get through this so that we can move on with you. Right. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the prayer. Okay. Please take care of her and be with him, and let him be as skilled as he's ever been today, right now. And so then she comes out, just, you get in the car and you just drive home, and you don't have words to say. What do you say?
Mm-hmm.
You just listen to the wind blow by and you feel every bump in the road.
Did you guys say anything at all on the drive, or not till you got home?
We honestly didn't talk about it ever again
Wow, okay.
for 15 years. We kept it a secret for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And from everybody else, the only two people that knew were the ones that encouraged us to have it. And so we didn't tell anybody else, and we didn't talk about it to each other. It was just done. Now let's pretend like it never happened and just do the next thing.
Right.
So you
I think
went and
part
got
of
the
it was,
scholarships and everything?
I'm sorry.
You went ahead and went to school, got the scholarships, completed everything?
Yep, I went on to Evansville about 3 weeks later, and the thing physically, I was still bleeding when I got to the college, and I was very, very concerned. But I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell my coach or even my best friend. We went to junior college together in Illinois. We both got recruited to go to Indiana, so she was there too, but I couldn't tell her either. I just had so much shame about the whole thing. And so I was so fearful. Tim was still in Mississippi. I remember calling the hospital and telling the nurse that I'm still bleeding, still cramping. And she said, you could have an ectopic pregnancy. And I didn't know what that meant. So I asked her, and she said, that's where the pregnancy is in the fallopian tube instead of in the uterus. And so the abortion wouldn't have taken care of that pregnancy. So that means I would have to go back somewhere to have another procedure to have and that's not an abortion. That's a medically necessary procedure. If the pregnancy is in the fallopian tube,
Right.
that's a topic that has to be taken care of, because otherwise the baby can't stay there and grow. There's no room for that baby to grow there. So that was a whole nother layer of fear. Here I'm in a new town. I don't have a doctor here. I can't talk to anybody. And here I might have an ectopic pregnancy. I can chuckle now, but really there was so much fear about that. Well, thankfully, by the grace of God,
miracle,
I did not have an ectopic pregnancy, and the bleeding and cramping eventually stopped. And I was so grateful. It was like, okay, now again, that denial, now nobody has to know, that's passed.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to tell anybody. So
I was gonna ask did you end up going to the hospital again to check if the
no,
ectopic pregnancy was happening, or you just waited it out?
I just waited it out.
Wow, okay. So how long did it take?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
It was probably seemed like forever, but it was probably a couple more weeks after that.
That's a long time to be in suspense, though. I can imagine that was super scary.
Yeah.
And to go from that to, I mean, she's very modest, but her basketball career is as good as anybody's. If you look at, she won every award that you could win. She's the female athlete of the year, the MCC conference player of the year, a scoring leader, rebounds. She still got records at the U of E that stand to this day. And so to go from that to the favor of the Lord, that his forgiveness and his grace is so awesome that you can go from that place of fear where we were at, thinking, man, what's going on? To finding success and favor then in everything. It was beautiful to be a part of. And,
Yeah.
and that's our heart, is to share that with people. That, listen, God is for you, man. He's not against you. And we want to make
So
sure you get that.
I was gonna ask, so you said for 15 years you guys got married. Did you get married after you graduated or?
Actually, we got married the next summer between
Okay.
my junior and senior years of college. We got married, and so then I had one more year of school, graduated from University of Evansville, and then we moved to Springfield, Illinois,
Okay.
to be closer to family there. And Tim was able to work there, and I got jobs there then after graduating. But yet again, not telling anybody, keeping the happy face on, got connected in a church, served on every committee I could, and just trying to stay busy, because
So
long as
when,
I stayed
oh no, go ahead, keep going.
as long as I stayed busy, then I didn't have to think about it.
Right.
I had just suppressed everything, all emotions, all the shame, everything. I just suppressed it. And then we got pregnant. The first pregnancy within our marriage ended in miscarriage. And all of that, everything that I had suppressed and stuff so deep down, came up to the surface. And just the lies that I believed at the time as truth, that the enemy was just pummeling me with, this is the punishment that you deserve. God's mad at you. You're never going to be a mother. And I believed all those things and struggled inwardly, but didn't talk to him, didn't talk to anybody at church, didn't reach out for any help whatsoever. And mental health back then wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so proud of these generations now that are reaching out for help earlier and not waiting decades like my generation. And so struggling, more grieving the loss of our miscarried baby, but also that extreme grief and shame of the abortion mixed in with all of that. It was very hard. But
When you said 15 years until it resurfaced, when 15 years later did it really come to the forefront for both of you?
so we'll move fast forward. Probably the biggest um, trauma that the abortion caused in my life, because I healed physically, was the broken relationship with Tim. The trust that relationships are built on, that foundation already had a crack in it before we even said I do, because I trusted him to protect me, and he didn't protect me. Even though we made the decision together, in my heart, I felt like I couldn't trust him anymore.
Hmm.
And so our marriage, we ended up having 3 kids at that time. We have 5 children now. But by the time we had our third child, we pretty much were just coexisting in the same household. We weren't talking much. We weren't touching. It was just about the kids and just
Work.
kind of like roommates almost, because we had this huge trauma, this unresolved wedge in our relationship. And we didn't know what it was. We never said, oh, well, this is the abortion causing this. No, it never occurred to us that this unresolved trauma is causing all of these issues in our relationship.
And Tim, how did you feel at the same time? So she was saying that Debbie really felt like you hadn't protected her and that was distancing her from you. What was
Right.
distancing you from her?
At that time, I was just pretty much numb. I was working and I was always a dad taking care of my responsibilities and those things, but I was just all the rest of my time was either work or I was playing ball or I was just filling that time that I should have been with her with one of those things, either work or playing ball or and I was drinking at the time too, living like you know, taking my wife and kids to church on Sunday and then live like the devil through the week, right? And like a lot of Christians, unfortunately, people who call themselves Christians live. And so, that was a problem, obviously. But that I was just, I was just giving her space. I didn't know what was going on. If we did try to talk, it usually didn't end up very well. So I just found it easier just to go to work, take care of business, just keep things rolling, and just, I think I was just constant. My mom and dad were married 77 years. Okay. So divorce was never really in our vocabulary. Her mom's been dad were married for over 50,
Almost 60.
almost 60 years. So we have a long heritage of working it out and sticking it out through the good and
Yeah.
bad, right? So that was always my mindset was, you know what, I'm just going to keep on keeping on here, man. Just got to, and had enough of the Lord in me to realize that, he's the only way that it's going to get better.
Hmm. So when did the breaking point come for you guys?
Yeah.
I got to the point where I was trying to change Tim. I wanted him to be who I wanted him to be.
I had stopped going to church by then. Okay. And now she's just going by herself and taking the kids.
So that was very embarrassing for me because that showed people, it was all about image. It showed people that there's something going on, that he's not coming to church with me anymore. And so to me, that's what jolted me. And I remember praying, God, what do I do? Because I was praying for him. I was the spiritual head of the household, but what I was doing was pushing him farther away instead of loving him. And I remember praying, and God just spoke so clearly to my heart. You are not the Holy Spirit. I want you to love him and pray for him. I was trying to be his conscience. I remember saying Christians don't do that kind of stuff. And so I was just pushing him farther away. And I felt like his salvation and his relationship with God was my responsibility. And God's like, no, that's my responsibility. You need to back off and let me do it. And so when I did that, I backed off and I just started praying more for him in a loving way and just tried to love him the best I could from a distance, but trying to do the little things. That's when he had a dramatic encounter with the Lord.
Yeah. I was working for the Illinois Department of Transportation at that time. And there was an older guy there who was a good friend of mine. And for about 8 years, we had worked together. And he was like a second father to me. And then I got a call that he had passed away in the middle of the night in his sleep. And it really just broke me, he knew my life, that I had a Christian wife and my Christian upbringing, but he knew also that I lived like the devil in front of him sometimes too, and that those two don't mix. And I knew that unless he had a come to Jesus moment, if I believed that people died and went to heaven, I had to believe that people die and go to hell as well. And that was the thing that weighed on me. And I remember just breaking and I wept like a child for a week, man, just begging God, if you'll give me another chance, Lord, I promise you I'll work harder. I'll try to get it right. I'll work on this, Lord. I'll do better. And that changed my life. That episode changed my life. God giving me another chance and showing me grace. Because the first time I took my own child's life, I didn't listen to the Lord like I should have. And now someone else in my life that I cherished had passed. And I told the Lord that I was going to listen from now on. And that's what I've tried to do, as I'll be 58 next month or this month.
When
So
you say that you Was it because you felt that you hadn't shared the gospel with him and so he
Exactly.
died
The
and that
guilt
was your
of,
fault?
yes, the guilt of not really being honest and sharing the truth like we should with people,
Right.
with grace, and yeah, that was the turning point. And then shortly after that, I was flipping through the TV one day and I saw a local advertisement for a church, and the Lord just spoke to me, and I ended up driving over and sitting in the parking lot of this place and asking God, if this is it, let it be so. And so for the next 15 years, we spent serving the Lord in this body of believers, and Lord just really doing some great things. And that's where the opportunities came forth and the healing.
Yeah. And so that was 1997 when that happened, when he had that encounter with the Lord. And so at that point, we both started seeking the Lord. We started going to this new church, and God became so big to us. All my life, I had God in this little box. But God, just how big God is and his love just opened up so big for us, and we both wanted more of God. So we started seeking him individually, and through that process the Lord then brought us closer together and started healing our marriage. And so we started serving in that church, and then in 2002 they started holding these weekend retreats, and it was called Encounter. And we were on the leadership team. So the women went one weekend and the men went another weekend. So there's about 15 of us at this encounter. Some ladies from Louisiana came up to lead that encounter. And I went into that retreat praying, God, you do in me whatever you want to do in me. I give you permission, and not thinking anything about the abortion whatsoever. And that weekend, he met me there so powerfully. These ladies were praying over me, praying against the spirit of heaviness and shame and guilt. They didn't know anything. Nobody there knew about my past, but that was what God wanted to pinpoint in my life. And as they were praying, I started weeping and weeping. And just I don't know how long I cried. It had to have been close to 30 minutes. I don't know, but it just poured out. It was as if that toxic poison that had been locked up inside of me so deeply for 15 years was being released through my tears. It was so cleansing. And immediately I felt free. I felt different. Like, not only did I feel it in my spirit, but I also felt like my mouth was set free, was no longer bound with this secret. And I immediately wanted to tell everybody there what about the abortion and what God had just done. So I knew something special had happened. But let me back up just a couple years before that, because our healing comes in layers. It's not
Right.
usually all at one time. So
Right.
before a couple years before that, I remember crying out to God at church, God, Jesus, what's keeping me from you? I felt like there was a wall in my spirit that was keeping me from getting closer to him. And as I was praying that night, I believe he whispered into my heart, you need to forgive yourself for the abortion. And again, I hadn't been thinking about it. I didn't know I needed to forgive myself. I knew God had forgiven me, but I was not embracing his forgiveness for me. So
Now, when
I
you say
still
you know
had,
God, oh, I'm sorry. When you said you know God forgave you, was it something that you repented of later on? And then it was kind of like you just kept thinking, okay, but there was that layer of it's all me, so I'm not going to be able to accept God's grace in my life. Was that what it was like for you, that you had repented, but you just didn't feel like that repentance was enough, that you could never be able to cover up everything that had happened?
yeah, I felt unworthy to let
Okay.
it go.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew God forgave me because that's what the Bible said. I've been taught that my whole life. So I knew that, but I felt so unworthy of God's love that I couldn't let myself let it go.
Right.
And that night, I prayed just a simple prayer. Okay, Jesus, I forgive myself for the abortion, just to myself. And immediately I felt that wall in my spirit come crashing down. And literally, I felt like I stepped over that rubble. Jesus was right there.
Amen.
He was right there the whole time with me, but I had erected this wall of unworthiness and not forgiving myself that had kept me from getting closer to him. I had a relationship with him, but I wasn't walking in the fullness of that relationship. So that was a few years that led up to that encounter. I then shared it with one person at that point, but I had a measure of freedom after forgiving myself, but I still couldn't share the secret until that encounter in 2002.
It was amazing. She come back from that encounter. At that time, I was an associate pastor of this church of 600 or 700 people. And she comes home and telling me that, listen, the Lord has touched me. I'm totally healed. She's a different person. I'm looking at a different person completely. And she said, I really believe we're supposed to tell everybody. And then the pastor at that time said, listen, I want you guys to give your testimony next week.
He asked if I would
us.
share my testimony.
Yeah. And we were like, yeah, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it, And we went from literally not talking to each other for 15 years to telling 600 perfect strangers our story. And I remember standing in the back of the church, watching her tell the story. And the Lord just showed me her just unrobing the shame. And just, like a queen, just this huge robe, it just fell at her feet. And that's the name of our book. He told me, you'll write a book, and I want you to call it Unrobing the Shame. And thanks the Lord, we were able to do that here. And we do have a book, and it's called Unrobing the Shame, One Couple's Abortion Story. And so everything's in there. We believe that God is using it as a tool to encourage people that no matter what has happened in their past, God is for them. And it's not, abortion in particular is not the unforgivable sin. Mm-hmm. And it makes people feel that way because it's never talked about. It's rarely talked about in churches. It's rarely talked about from the pulpit. It's rarely talked about at all. And so when somebody finds themselves in that situation, they're just quiet. Mm-hmm. Because of the shame, the same type of shame that we felt. And if you believe the numbers are true, the numbers in the church of women who have had abortions are the same as the numbers of women outside of the church. Mm-hmm. So there's a need for us to show some love and some grace to some people and give them an opportunity, because not everyone is shouting, the greatness of their abortion experience.
Right.
We want to help people, and that's it.
What, just as a last question, how would you guys encourage a young couple who's potentially facing an abortion decision? That's what they're thinking about. And they're believers, but they're scared and they don't know what to do. How would you encourage them?
It's a great question. First of all, I would say slow down. And I know with the abortion pill being available now, but only up to like 11 weeks, it creates that sense of urgency that we feel. The pressure tries to force us to make a quick decision. And I would encourage people to slow down, to do your research, find out what abortion really is, what the procedures are like, find out what the side effects are, what the potential effects, how it's going to impact you physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Abortion isn't a quick fix, even though the enemy tries to shroud it in, okay, there's a problem now. And even the abortion industry, we're here to fix your problem. You have a sickness and we're going to make you well. But it doesn't make us well. It wounds us and it traumatizes us. Not just women, as you can hear, men as well are impacted. So slow down, go to a pregnancy medical clinic near you and get an ultrasound, learn about your body and the stages of development. Try to put aside the fears and let someone help you think outside of those fears to see the reality that this is a child. It's not tissue. The heart begins beating at like day 21 after fertilization. And the very moment that egg is fertilized with that sperm, all the DNA for that human being is there in that moment.
Amen.
So that's when life begins. So I would say, find out the facts, be careful where you're getting your information from, go to a faith-based pregnancy medical clinic, get that ultrasound, because so many times pregnancies do end in miscarriage, as we know, a natural miscarriage. And so it's important that you go and check to make sure you have a viable pregnancy in the first place. Make sure that you don't have an ectopic pregnancy. Because if it's not a viable pregnancy, then let nature take its course and allow your body to take care of that. And then you still have grieving to do, but you don't have the guilt associated with taking that life and then not knowing, well, what if I had let that life have a chance?
And then Tim, is there anything you want to add, or?
I would just, along the same lines, encourage people to understand that you're not alone. You're not alone. You know, so many times we find ourselves in a situation like this and we cocoon away and we hide and we feel like we're alone, that I'm the only person who's doing this. And the reality is, no, unfortunately, there were 63 million and counting, you know, and so of abortions in this country alone, you know, so you're not alone. Look for help. Back in the day, we didn't even know there was such thing as a pregnancy center. Had no idea that help and that resource was there. You know, look at the opportunities for adoption, and there's families that are looking, and who knows how the Lord will work it out if we'll give him a chance. So, like she said, slow down, look for help, find the help, talk to people. Don't hide away, and don't be alone. Don't be alone.
And I would add to, the Lord led us to start a pregnancy medical clinic in Springfield, Illinois. After our healing, that was the first step that he led us to do to help people who are making these difficult pregnancy decisions. And now we're doing abortion healing specifically. And I serve on a hope line through Support After Abortion for those who are struggling after abortion. And the thing that I see and hear a lot from women is, I wish the father of the baby would have just said, I'm with you, and not just say, you know, it's up to you, do what you want, but step up as men and say, I will stay with you. I will parent this baby with you. I'm with you. I want this child, and really support her. That doesn't always change the scenario. Sometimes she still chooses abortion, but so many women that I've personally talked to, that's what they said. I wish he would have just said, I will be there with you and not leave you.
Well, Debbie and Tim, thank you so much. And everyone, again, you're listening to Debbie and Tim Shultz from Tennessee, sharing about their abortion experience, as well as how the Lord brought healing to their life and the ways that they've seen him grow them and the ways that they're now able to encourage others. So please stay tuned for our next episode. And again, thank you so much, Debbie and Tim, for being here today.
Thanks again for the opportunity.